Well, welcome back to I'm Glad I Heard That podcast. We are glad you're here, and I'm here with Emily.
Hello.
And she is somebody that makes me laugh every day I come to work.
I try.
You do. You absolutely do. So we're glad you're here, and we hope you'll enjoy talking to us today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about infant loss and infertility, as October is Infant Loss and Infertility Awareness Month. And so we're glad Emily's here to tell us a little bit about her story. And we're so glad she's willing to be vulnerable and share with us, and also help us to know how to support our friends and our family members that are going through this.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And she also leads a book club. So if this is something that you yourself are going through, we would love for you to join her. And we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end.
Yes.
So Emily, tell me a little bit about your story.
About my story. Well, I met my awesome husband, Steve, when we were in high school. I was 14 and he was 15, and we've been together ever since, which has been really cool because when we got married, we had been together for 9 years already at that point. So this November is our 8th anniversary, so we've actually been together for 17 years, which is really cool. I mean, we've had a lot of life together. But we were never the couple who always said we were going to have kids. You know, it was kind of a maybe. I'm not a huge fan of large crowds of children. Like when Vacation Bible School is going on around here, I am nowhere to be seen. Like I'm very busy doing other things that week. It's just not, my thing. But a few years into our marriage, we were having that conversation of, do we want to have kids? Do we want to pursue that? At the time, we were spending a lot of time with his niece and nephew and doing just all those fun things that you do with kids, like going to see Santa and going to see the Easter Bunny and taking them to church. And it was really fun to be in that role of teaching kids about Jesus and feeling like we, had kids and we're a family.
Yeah.
So we decided we were going to see what happens, ditch the birth control and just kind of see what happens. And I got pregnant right away. Mm-hmm. And so when you're the person who feels like you were really torn about where you wanted your life to go and then something happens, you think, well, that's God's will. Yeah. And I even said that, I looked at him and I said, I'm so excited. This was obviously the direction we were meant to go in. God clearly wanted us to do this. It happened right away. There was so much joy.
Easy as God's
we translate
will.
Easy as God's way. And it just felt so seamless. That was what was weird about it. So fast forward a few weeks, I found out that pregnancy was not viable, that was an ectopic pregnancy, which I had not even heard of an ectopic pregnancy, which is really a tubal pregnancy, which cannot be viable, unfortunately. So the week we found out, we were actually supposed to be going out of town to a conference for my husband's work. And the doctor said, we really don't want you far in case anything happens. And of course, you kind of read into, Dr. Google is just great for really panicking yourself, but I could have had a tube explode, or I could have had just all kinds of not good things happen. So the pregnancy ended up releasing itself. I didn't want to be in doctor's care at that point. I just kind of wanted to let my body let go of that naturally, which is what happened. Yeah. So I ended up having just all kinds of wacky things happening with my body. I saw different doctors. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is a really weird thing, but it's also very common. And of course, I had no idea. Mm-hmm. I had endometriosis, that's another really wacky thing. Yes. And then a genetic mutation and hormonal issues. So I started seeing doctors, and it was like every doctor I went to, was some new weird diagnosis I had never heard of. So I ended up getting pregnant again towards the end of that year. Mm-hmm. It was a hard time because my grandmother had passed away earlier in the year. My husband's grandmother was really sick. But the pregnancy was progressing, and it was at the point where on Christmas Eve, we got to tell his family that we were expecting, which just felt really cool. Mm-hmm. It was a great moment. His grandma at that point was dying of leukemia, and it was a great moment to be able to announce that to your family. Well, a few weeks into January, we found out on a Friday that I had lost the pregnancy, that I got told those words, there's no heartbeat, which are just horrible words. I hate those words. And that afternoon, we found out that his grandmother had just days to live. So it was a lot happening at once. And so at the time, I didn't want to tell a dying woman, oh, by the way, that great-grandchild you were really excited about It's not going to happen. I have to miscarry. And so we just decided not to tell her. So we just spent a couple weeks with her just kind of putting on a charade because I just couldn't tell her, we lost that pregnancy. So going even forward, I had 3 more pregnancies. 2 were really early. They call them chemical pregnancies. Again, another term I had never heard of, which is just a very, very early miscarriage. And then I had 1 that I was a little bit further along.
In the first
trimester. It was so much loss. And this was a couple years. And in the meantime, it's like we lost 2 grandmothers. I lost a great aunt. After my grandmother passed away, my dad's family became really estranged. And so it was a storm where just every day something was going on that was really hard.
And you mentioned that at the funeral that you had to tell everyone because you had not told them.
At my husband's grandmother's funeral, she had told so many people. I mean, she was ecstatic that we were expecting. Like, she had even had some kind of present she had given my husband when he was a baby, saving it for us and gave it to us, kind of saying, I know I'm not going to be here at the next Christmas, but this is going to be for you. So there's like a lot of salt just being added in the wounds, but we had people at the funeral going, I heard you're expecting, congratulations. And at his funeral, like, my husband's grandmother was the only in-law I had on my husband's side who liked me, and so to lose her was just not fun. But then to also be explaining at her funeral, like, that didn't work out. We lost the baby. And then people have no idea what they say to you.
And
so they kind of ramble and they say stupid things. So like it just was awful. And so as we continued to talk to doctors, it just became very obvious that this was not going to be something my body was going to be capable of doing. And that was a dream that we just had to say, okay, God, we don't understand this. We don't know why you would put a desire on our hearts. And not see that to fruition. So there's a lot of loss. It's a lot of dreams die. When you miscarry, you miss everything. You're not going to see that baby grow up or go to Halloween or start kindergarten. You're not going to be able to see that child get married. Everything's just gone. So
it's so much loss.
Yeah, it's just a lot of loss at one time. And for me, my miscarriages were also very hard on me physically, where like I was getting sick and I was just in a lot of pain. And nobody talks about that. So,
and I think
it was a storm.
It can feel so alone, like we said.
You feel very alone, and I would tell my husband repeatedly, like, I feel so violated. Like, there's this horrible thing happening in my body that I did not ask for, that I did not want to happen, and it just feels so ugly. So, it was hard. It was not fun.
Yeah.
It's not fun by any means.
And that's why you have a heart, so women wouldn't be alone. That
Absolutely.
We would have people to gather together and not be on their own.
Absolutely. And the thing is I found a lot of really good support in online groups, which is great. I love having online groups for support, but there's something about actually meeting with another person who gets it and gets what it's like to go to all those doctor's appointments and be poked and prodded time and time again. That's nice. But online support is great too. But I'm really excited about the book club because it's been great to sit and chat with other women about how hard it is. You think this is supposed to be this natural thing, and for a lot of women and couples, it's a really hard thing.
And you brought up the verse about, God gives you the desires of your heart. Yes. And we were talking about how so many times scriptures that are just so encouraging to us or songs or things people would say, that are meant to be supportive, they actually can hurt our hearts.
Oh, yeah.
And so how do we find the comfort that we need from God, and how do we wrestle with some of those deeper questions? So what did you find was helpful to you?
What was helpful to me was listening to the worship songs that actually spoke to what I was going through. And one of my favorite ones was I Will Trust in You by Lauren Daigle, because the words are, when you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust in you. Because I didn't understand it. It was like, I went from this person being really on the fence about having kids to having all these pregnancies to being told, hey, this is not going to happen. Yeah. And it's like, okay, God, what do I do now other than have the kind of faith where you don't see the next step?
Yeah, you trust.
You don't see.
Even if you trust.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I think so many times we struggle with the idea that we don't live in heaven.
We do not live in heaven. This is a very broken world. There's broken relationships, there's illness, there's disease, there's accidents and injuries. I mean, this world is far from perfect.
Yeah, the miracle is when God breaks in.
Absolutely.
And does the other thing.
And I also learned to pray genuinely. There was a time where I told my dad, I said, I just feel like, I'm praying and I don't feel like God is there, is he hearing me? And my dad said at one point, you really need to pour out. I call it rage praying. It's really called lament. But I called it rage prayer, where I would just scream. Like these heart-wrenching screams. And it's like, God, did you forget about me? Like, I'm your daughter. I work in your church. I work for you. Which that doesn't give you any more credit for anything. But, I would say that. And I realized that actually, like, he wants to hear that. Like, you can scream at God. It's okay to scream at God. He can handle it. And that's what my dad said was, do you think he can't handle, like, this outpour of emotion? He wants that from you. And so that was helpful. I would scream and cry in my car a lot, which I'm sure looked a little crazy, to people.
Yeah, people are
passing me, right. Or I would just have my moments at home where it's like, I just have to get this out,
Same. Joe and the kids would leave, and I would just cry out. And
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, because sometimes he answers those heart questions in a really personal way.
Yeah.
And then other times you just know that he hears you, and you feel that connection.
Right.
And I think that just the reality of, at some point, there's this shift too, where you feel the awareness that there's also an enemy in this picture that's trying to steal your relationship with God. So there's that dynamic too, and I think that awareness always came to me when I read the Psalms, or when I cried out to him. That kind of came through also. Well, along with that, Emily, like, how do you trust God even when the answer is no?
When the answer is no. I'm still figuring that out. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm still figuring that out. But what I really love about the Bible is that we can read into Jesus and his character. And one of my favorite passages from the Bible really is when Jesus is praying before he is about to be crucified. And he's essentially saying, is there any other way? And the answer is no. I know he wanted to go to the cross for us, but do I really think he was thrilled about having to be murdered and humiliated publicly? But no, he wasn't. And so when I look back at that, I think, well, Jesus was begging for another answer. And the answer was no. And that just speaks to me, is that my Savior went through things that I'm going through. Not that I'm comparing, being crucified to infertility, very different things. But he compares.
Yeah, he does.
In that he felt all the same emotions we feel about God. I want a different answer. Like, I'm begging you for a different answer. And we don't always get that. But diving into the scriptures is never going to hurt you. But I would say it's easy for people to throw out the verses that feel flowery and pretty and happy, and use, scripture out of context. So if I ever had questions about, well, what does this verse mean? What do these verses mean about I'm going to get the desires of my heart? I would ask our pastors here, or Harry here, or whoever we had here, or my counselor, who is an amazing Christian woman, and just say, well, I don't get this. What does this mean?
Right.
For me. And that you're right when you said earlier, this is not a perfect world. Not all of the things we want are going to happen here. And that's why I'm just so grateful we have a Jesus who cared enough to come to this world, to die and to rise again, so that someday everything will be perfect for us.
Every tear wiped away.
Every tear will be wiped away. Like, I'll get to see those babies I had. Everything will be renewed. Like, I will get to meet them. And that's an incredible thought. Heaven becomes a lot more real when somebody you really want to meet is there. It's just a very different way of looking at things. So in times my faith was very strengthened. At times my faith was very questioned. Now, I'm not going to be the person who said, well, I just hung to the cross all the time and just had this perfect faith. No. I was mad at God. I was ticked at God. There was a rage that came out of me of losing baby after baby that I didn't know was in there. To scream at God the way I did. I mean, it was difficult, but we do have a Savior.
You still have your faith at the end of that. And I think actually being able to share all those emotions with him held on to that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and he wants those emotions from you. If you have something you want to shout about, like, God is the perfect being to shout that out to. I mean, that's who wants to hear from us.
Yeah, it reminds me of Mary and Lazarus, right?
Yeah.
And Mary and Martha at the tomb of Lazarus, and Jesus wept with them, and they cried out to him, like, why weren't you here? And that's how we feel sometimes. It's like, why weren't you here?
Right.
And we don't get to see into the heavenlies to find out what kind of battles are going on for our hearts and souls. But the enemy is really after our relationships with God, and comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And God comes to give us life. So, but there is so much that when we go through those times that does hurt. And I think for our husbands too, there's a lot of men watching this today too, and they, I think, are often so many times forgotten.
Yes.
So I hope the men listening that know men that have experienced infant loss will support their friends. But what advice would you give, Emily, for supporting men that are going
For
through it.
supporting me, what I thought was interesting is that so many people would actually ask my husband, how's Emily doing? I heard she lost her baby. And my husband would kind of look at these people and go, well, like this was a joint thing.
Right.
This wasn't just her baby. I think it's just actually asking the questions. Men, your friends should be asking you, well, how are you doing? Because it was hard enough for him to be losing a baby, but he also had to watch his wife go through hell and back. I mean, he couldn't do anything. When I was physically miscarrying and when I was just laying on the ground in so much pain. He was so helpless, and men don't like to be helpless. Men like to be the fixers.
Yeah.
I think just simply asking the guys, hey, how are you doing? Yeah. If there's a couple who's struggling, it's hurting the man too. This is not just a women's issue. Mm-hmm. It is different for men and women. I think we both grieve separately and we grieve together.
Yeah, and learning to grieve together is a really hard thing. The statistics aren't so good for how people make it through.
They're not great.
And end up together at the end of that.
Yeah.
So just amazing that you guys actually clung to each other. You said your relationship really grew as you grieved together.
Yeah, it did. And we really kept communication very open. He and I both said throughout this whole thing, we are going to continually talk about how we're feeling and our emotions about this and our anger about this. And that was really healthy. And that was actually a big step on his part, too. I think a lot of men have a really hard time talking about how they're feeling about something that's not good that's happening in their lives. And we kept that communication very open between us, and we sought counseling separately, and then we sought counseling together. So we were going to counseling all the time. But we both had feelings that were separate from each other to deal with, and then we had our things as a couple to deal with, too.
So, what advice to the men that are supporting their wives when they do feel helpless and like they're just waiting for the other side when the grief subsides, but really...
the little things do matter. I mean, my husband was always doing things like, what can I bring you home? Or just picking something up to bring me home. Like one day I said, God, I could go for a Jolly Rancher. And he brought me like 500 Jolly Ranchers. Like I had Jolly Ranchers for months. But he would just do those little things. Or he would just take it upon himself to go, what needs to be done in our house? What can I take off her plate? But he also was like a buffer to keep some people away from me who maybe didn't have the most helpful words to say. And through all this, I realized people are so well-meaning, but being well-meaning doesn't always translate to actually being helpful.
You can be sincere.
So, he really did a good job of I don't know, is it running defense? I don't know anything about sports, but just trying to keep people away from me who he knew were probably going to say something that wasn't going to be terribly helpful.
And Emily
great, but he had my back.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
He had
I'm so glad.
We both were talking, because of course we were talking about this interview, and he said to me, what did you really take away from that about our marriage? I said, that you would take a bullet for me. I can say that with all honesty, is that, he would just do so many little things to make me know I was loved. I had texted him at one point, I'm feeling emotional and I really want to go shopping today. And he texted back, you could buy an island today, and I wouldn't bat an eye. Obviously, we cannot afford an island, just so we don't. But I love that, he had that kind of support of whatever you need to do to make it today, I am here. So, that was great.
That's so great. And Emily is the funniest person, one of the funniest people I know. So to be the person that always brings humor and then you're grieving, that's hard.
Yeah, it is hard, and I do really believe that laughter can be very healing, which is why, for me, part of my grief process was kind of bunker down at home. There were just days where I knew I cannot go out into the world today. Either physically I was feeling horrible, or mentally it was a bad day, and I would sit there and chain watch The Office. And I would just allow myself to have a big old belly laugh at a show that I already knew what was coming. I've already seen these shows how many times. And actually during that is when I started my daily routine where every morning I read a Bible verse and I watch a comedy sketch. And I still do that because I try to start my day off watching comedy. So I love comedy. I love stand-up comedians. And I try to start my day laughing because I figure if I can at least laugh
that's very good.
Before I get out of bed in the morning, maybe
I'm going to need to get some of those comedy sketches coming my way. Okay.
So, but I love, or he and I mean, my husband and I would actually seek out, we need to laugh today. Let's find something really funny to watch.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And you have a story for me, too. Something about...
I have a story for you. So this was... I was telling Corey, our cameraman, this story, that right after I lost one of my pregnancies, my husband and I went out for pizza. I was like, we just need pizza. We went to one of those places where you build your own pizza. And we're sitting down eating, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this little boy just pie his mom in the face with a pizza, which is like not something you see all the time. And it was one of those moments where like I saw that and I was cracking up. And I felt so bad for this lady who I was laughing at, and I was trying to tell her, of course, I'm backtracking, which did not help the situation, but I'm so sorry. My husband and I are trying so hard to have kids, and I'm looking at you and your sweet little boy who just pied you in the face with a pizza, and just the irony of this day is so stinking funny to me. And my husband, who doesn't always like pick up on social cues, was just eating like nothing was happening, so like we allowed ourselves to have those funny moments, but it was the kind of laughter that just takes over your whole body and explodes, and sometimes
kids do like to pie their parents.
It just was hysterical.
So my son Joe, for his birthday party, that's what he wanted to do.
He wanted to pie you in the face?
Yeah, he literally said, get like whipped cream and put it on pie pans, and he pied his friends and me and his dad.
That's hysterical.
And his brother, of course.
And so of course we're sitting there, and I'm like, I kind of wanted to be here with the little boy. I don't know that I really wanted to go find
and then you're like,
the pizza, but it just was one of those situations that was so funny.
And that you have to laugh.
So, you have to laugh. You just have to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think bringing laughter in does bring healing anytime. Like that's a great way to start the morning.
That's what I try to do. Is every morning I watch a comedy sketch. I try to keep them mostly appropriate.
That's hard, actually.
It is hard, actually. So.
Okay.
But there's some good comedians out there.
You are running a book club.
I am running a book club.
And so tell us a little bit about that.
So our book club is really just a place this is specifically for women. My dream is eventually that we'll have a women's and a men's thing, but we're not there yet. It's still in its baby stage, which is exciting. But we've done one book so far. The book club has read the book Why Her, which is about comparison. And really when you're in the thick of infertility, all you do is compare yourself to the people who have babies when you don't, or the people who seem to sneeze and get pregnant, and that's not your situation. So it's been a really good book about why comparison has never brought anyone joy. So we're finishing up that book on December 2nd and 16th. The book club is going to take a break from books and just watch some good Priscilla Shirer videos. She has some amazing videos. So she's one of my favorite speakers of all time. I love Priscilla Shirer. And then January 13th, we start a book on prayer called Fervent by Priscilla Shirer, which is an awesome, awesome book, and really changed how I think about prayer and how I do pray. So I'm really excited of where book club is going to go. It was just a dream of mine to start something up for women to come together, because you do need community. When you're in the thick of infertility, when you're losing baby after baby, or if you're trying to adopt and it's not going well, or whatever it is, when you're trying to build your family and it's not happening, you need community because it's hard. Yeah. And you don't get any more points for going through it solo. So come and join us in our
And we
book
don't
club.
want you to come to church and feel like you're the only one going through something, because there's definitely somebody else going through this. And you can find that community that you need, because in that moment, it does feel like everybody else is pregnant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you definitely need people like Emily to hang out with.
Yeah, online really turned me onto how many people in my community were probably experiencing this. With my online group, I was meeting women who had like 15 or 18 miscarriages, or who were, in the thick of infertility for 10 years, or who were trying to adopt and it was just never happening. And I thought, well, I want to meet these people. They got to be here somewhere. I want to see them in person. I don't want to just talk to them online. I want to actually get these women in a group, because online it was a great group, and I wanted to see, these ladies face to face.
So great. And I think the message is that God didn't forget you. He
not
doesn't
at all.
stop loving you, and you still have a purpose in the kingdom. You have a purpose in your church. You are loved by your church. You are loved by the people in your church, and you're seen and known. And we care about what you're going through so much. Yeah. And we want to celebrate the other good things that are happening in your life too, but we also want to walk through the hard time and not have you do it by yourself. And so I'm so thankful Emily stepped out in this way. And my friend, and let me tell you, you are not going to be sad spending time with her. You are not. So thank you for listening. Please do share it, and hopefully you will get to enjoy some time hearing other talks from I'm Glad I Heard That, and we'll see you back next time.